Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business. Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm here with Jono Bacon. Jono, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, Michael. I appreciate it.
So you're a community and collaboration strategy consultant. You've worked with companies like Deutsche Bank, Intel, SAP, Sony, Mozilla, XPRIZE, IBM, a whole bunch of others, right, that people have likely heard about. But first tell us, what does community and collaboration strategy consultant actually mean?
It is not just a good question. It's probably the most important question. So what I do is there are companies out there, and what they do is they see the potential of community wrapped around their business in some capacity. So it could be, for example, if they're a technology firm, maybe they want to have an open source project where people can collaborate and build technology. Maybe they have a platform that people are building applications on top of. Maybe they have a product where they want their customers to kind of support each other and provide guidance or write documentation or produce videos or organize local events, or there's a multitude of different areas in which communities can offer a lot of value. So a lot of companies, when they see that potential value, the next question is, okay, how do I go about harnessing it and building it? And that's what I do. So what I will do is I'll come into an organization, learn about what they want to accomplish, what their broader business goals are and the business ambitions. And then I will help them to put together a community strategy, which is broken into a few different pieces. So there's a set of annual objectives, which are, the broad pieces of work that we're going to deliver. There's a set of target audience members and personas. And then that all gets broken down into the individual tactics of how you go about executing it. So if you've got a broader goal, what are the individual nitty-bitty bits of work that you have to do to actually deliver that? And then I'll also provide guidance to them in how they integrate it into the company. How do they train the right people? How do they hire the right people? How do they measure this work? I'll work with the folks that they have executing this work on the ground. I'll set expectations with the executive team. So it's very strategic in nature, but it's very, very hands-on as well and pragmatic.
And how did you get into this area of the community strategy and kind of collaboration and so forth?
Probably like most of your guests, it was a bit of a wandering path. And I actually wrote a book called The Art of Community, which came out, good grief, it was 2008, I think it was. The bit of backstory here is I used to work for a company called Canonical, which was building a platform called Ubuntu, which became one of the most prominent open source operating systems in the world. And while I was there, I was really just kind of knee deep in discovering community and the value of it. And I realized that this could be applied in a multitude of other areas as well, not just in terms of open source. So I made a decision. It was actually on a flight moving to the US where I decided to, one, write a book about community and how to go about it. Two, start a conference so I could meet other people and get to know the community managers more and more. And three, where possible, do some potential consulting on the side. I focused on the book, focused on the conference, and then the consulting actually came once the book was published. And one of the first companies that reached out to me was a very large bank based in Europe. And they said, look, we've bought your book. We think it's great, but we need some help in how we integrate it. So I used to do it on the side. And I didn't have a huge amount of time, so I used to do it for a small number of larger companies. And there were relatively limited engagements. And then I spent some time Canonical, continued at Canonical, spent some time at XPRIZE and GitHub. And I decided, I'd always flirted with the idea of doing it full time and went and did it. And so far, so good.
And let's just take the bank in Europe. How did they get your book? Was it just the publisher that did all the work on that? Were you marketing it? How did it actually end up in the hands of that client?
Yeah, I did some marketing around it. There's no doubt. The publisher did some. To anyone who's watching this or listening to this, who's thinking about writing a book, the one thing you should know is your publisher will never do a lot of marketing for you because they publish a lot of books and marketing is expensive. So you get a very thin slice of the cake. So I basically did a ton of promotion of it myself. So I was, going on podcasts. I was writing blog posts about it. I was speaking at conferences about it. And I don't actually know how they originally got it, but I'm sure they got it through one of...
Suffice to say, you were definitely promoting it. You were kind of cranking that engine yourself. You didn't just publish a book, write it, put it out there and hope that people found it. You were doing what you could to kind of hustle it and make sure that people saw it.
Exactly. And
then a question for you. So even back in 2003, I think it was, you showed your entrepreneurial side because you were doing some of the consulting, writing, development. This is now many years. Did you know, even at that time and kind of earlier on, like, did you always have that entrepreneurial side to you?
In retrospect, yes. At the time, I had no idea what entrepreneurialism was, to be honest with you. Being raised in the UK, and I don't think this is general across the UK, but certainly my background, I was raised in the north of England, and my brother works in technology, and he kind of got me into all of this. But I never grew up around entrepreneurs, especially. I mean, my dad was and kind of still is, but I didn't really know it at the time. But what I realized was that what I really love doing is I love collaborating on different problems. And when I used to work for my previous companies full time, I was always fascinated about working on a multitude of things outside of that. So, for example, when I was at X Prize, I wasn't just working on launching these prizes and building a community around X Prize. I was doing podcasts. I was writing books. I was, going to conferences. I'd have companies reaching out to ask for help, or I'd go and speak at internal events. So it's always been a passion of mine. I just love the diversity of the work. And that's one of the things that I realized when I started consulting was the diversity of the work is one of the most exciting elements of it. And it just keeps pushing you and growing you in different directions.
So yeah, I think it was in 2009, you kind of formally started your current consulting company. But in 2014, you were the director of community at X Prize. Then in 2015, you were the director of community at GitHub, which was later acquired by Microsoft. So you kind of alluded to this right now, but like working on your consulting business on the side during those full-time engagements, or were they not full-time engagements? Like, were you working with multiple clients? How are you structuring your work with those organizations and your consulting business at the same time?
So back then, when I was at Canonical, I used to consult on the side, and Canonical really had no issue with it. They were pretty happy with it. I asked them about it, and their view was, if he's talking to companies, he's probably talking to them about Ubuntu, and that's a good thing for us. I really stopped consulting when I was at X Prize because I was so focused on the work there. I was at X Prize for a while, and then I decided to move on I was missing the technology side of things. I really wanted to get back into the more hands-on technology side of things. Like X Prize are an amazing organization. They launched these huge incentive competitions, but the organization itself is not really a technology firm. They're a facilitator of competitions and prizes. The teams who are doing the work are very much technologists. And one of the things I've always loved about technology and open source is that there's a very pragmatic way in which people can build communities. And that's when I went to GitHub. And then when I was at GitHub, I did bits of work on the side. There was always kind of this, like, with the exception of being at X Prize, there was always this trickle of work on the side. And even to this point today, like I've been consulting full time now for just over 3 years. I've never gone after work. The work has always come to me, somewhat fortuitously. So even when I was at these other organizations, people would just email me and say, hey, we need some help with this, and I'd be happy to help. So
for everyone listening right now who might still be in a corporate position that's maybe thinking about doing consulting or might even be doing some stuff on the side as you were doing, during that time when you were kind of full-time engaged in work, were you continuously working on your brand? Like, were you still putting out content, still doing podcasts, still doing all that stuff? Or were you 100% focused, aside from some little, projects? Yeah. Was the focus on the company that you were working for, or were you still on the side doing other things to build your brand and get kind of your thought leadership and content out?
It's actually a bit of both. So, for example, when I was at X Prize, Canonical X Prize and GitHub, wherever I've worked full time, there was always pushing the brand of what we were doing there. So for example,
how about your brand? Like, you as a thought leader, your website, were you always putting out content yourself, even during the time at full time, like full employment?
Right. So while we were always during the day pushing the brand of the organization, outside of that, always consistently pushing my own brand. And it's weird because, to be honest with you, the concept of, personal brand building makes me feel a bit queasy when people talk about that, because there are so many people out there who do it in such a nauseating capacity where they're all about the volume of content as opposed to the quality of content. So look, I'd be lying to you if I wasn't saying that I'm always pushing my work and the work that I've done on social media at events and beyond. And I've done that throughout my career. But the goal of it really wasn't specifically around building my brand. I didn't wake up in the morning and think, I need to go and build my brand. It was more, I want to share the cool stuff that I'm doing. And it's actually one of the reasons why my business is called Jono Consulting, was because when I started out, I didn't particularly want to set up a large consulting practice. So I didn't want to hire a ton of people. I wanted to hire an assistant, someone to do my books, some other bits and pieces. So I called it Jono Consulting. The reason why was because people knew who I was. If I created a completely new company name, no one would have any idea what it was. And therefore, I'd have to start again. So I thought, given the fact that it's primarily just me, why make it harder than it needs to be? But I think consultants who are listening and watching this really do you need to constantly push your brand, because it's people hiring you for your skills and your expertise.
Yeah, I think that's an important insight, but also a good lesson, right? That probably one thing that's led to people reaching out to you and kind of, you not having to do much marketing yourself has been that you've been planting the seeds for a while, right? It's not that you didn't just expect that all of a sudden a lot of work would come your way. You tilled the land, you planted the seeds, you watered it, you did it over and over again. And over time, that built up a pipeline that continues to serve you until, to this day. Would that be accurate?
Yeah. And I'd actually take it even a step further. In fact, when I started out, one of the reasons why I didn't do this earlier was because I had anxiety that there wouldn't be enough work. When I started consulting full time, my wife and I had an agreement that we were financially secure enough to basically give it a go, see how it goes for 6 months. And I was convinced that it was going to take a while to kind of get going. I was going to give it more of a year. And since I've started, I've not had an empty month. I mean, I've been fully booked since I started. Now, I know that part of the reason why that is the case is because I wrote a book, and it's because I've spent years getting to know people in the technology world and beyond. So I had a bit of a head start. It's like if someone's listening to this and they've just come out of college and want to start consulting, it's going to be a different experience because you're going to need to build all of those networks. But there was a lot of anxiety at the beginning about whether there's going to be any business, let alone enough business. So
there's a lot of people there that have books, right? Who are authors, but their calendars aren't full with work. So if we can kind of like go a little bit deeper into what you're saying, what do you think is the real difference for you, or what has made the difference that has allowed you to be fully booked? What stands out to you? Like, why are you always fully booked? Why do people keep coming back to you or come to you in the first place? If you had to kind of maybe identify one or two things that you feel are the biggest factors in that success, what would you say?
It's a really great question. It's a difficult question for me to answer because I have this paranoia of sounding egotistical. So I'm going to put that to one side for 1 second because
This is a safe zone. It's okay. Don't worry.
I appreciate that. So I think one of the reasons why I've not struggled is, first of all, there are just not that many people out there who do what I do. There are a handful of people, and there are people who do kind of developer relations or community engagement. But I think I'm relatively unique in the fact that I tend to deal a lot with it both. I span from an executive audience down to the people who are doing the work. So a lot of the people who come to me as prospective clients are people who are on the executive team or they're in a kind of a more senior position. And I think some of my friends in the industry who do similar work, primarily operating with the practitioners, and a lot of those folks don't write checks. So I think that's one of the things that's helped. I think the other element, there's no doubt in my mind, is that, I mean, I've been working professionally since 2003, and I've been really, I guess you could say, building my brand since 1998. So over 10 years of treading the boards. I've flown all over the world to conferences. I've written books. I've spoken a lot. And I think especially in the open source world, which was my heritage, I think a lot of people have kind of, I wouldn't say pigeonhole, but people see me as the community guy, So I think I've benefited from this in that a lot of people in the industry people who I've worked with or people who I haven't worked with, just people who I know, when someone says, oh, I really want to build a community, do you know anyone? Someone thinks, oh, you should talk to Jono.
Right. So one thing is really clear to me, Jono, is that you have not just sat at home putting out a little bit of content, waiting for people to knock on your door.
No, I'm very, very organized when it comes to content.
Well, and can we go beyond? So is it not, it sounds like it's not just organized, it's very active in terms of content, relationships, going to events, right? Articles, books, meeting people, conferences like that you put on. You've been hitting all the different channels or many different channels so that you are known, but beyond known, you are trusted in that
right.
space.
And I think the trust is the most important thing. It's odd because in an online context, I'm very organized. My social media is always busy. I'm reusing content. I'm always creating content on my blog and elsewhere. Like I write for a variety of different publications, Forbes, Thrive Global, opensource.com, a variety of places. So content, I think, is very important to keep you in the mindset of your peers. It's interesting from an events perspective. I know a lot of people who spend every night going to meetups. I don't do that. I very rarely go to meetups. I go to some conferences, but honestly, I'd rather be at home with my family because I love my business and I love my work, but I love my family more.
I'm with you 100% on that. I feel the exact same way. I've put in a lot of time at conferences and meetups and events, especially the early years of building different businesses. But yeah, with two kids now, I mean, it's nice to go out and definitely to mastermind and network and meet different people at certain times. The priority is definitely spending time with family.
Well, and I think, I think the good news is that, and I'm sure you're exactly the same, like you can do both, right? You can have a really great relationship with your family and enjoy doing what you're doing and go above and beyond in what you're doing. The one thing I would say that I've learned as well is when I was kind of in the early stages of my career and I wasn't consulting full time, I've just always been the kind of guy that I love having lunch with people. I love going down the pub with people. I like having dinner with people. I'm very social, but especially with people who I know. And it's amazing how many clients have come in and how many relationships have been forged from just meeting someone randomly at a conference and having lunch with them or having a coffee with them and not seeking to gain anything from them. Like I have a general policy that with 98% of the people who I meet, I don't want anything from them. Maybe I'd like to have dinner with you and get to know you a little bit more, but I'm never actively soliciting business. And part of the reason for that is, I'm very fortunate in the fact that right now, I don't need to solicit business, but I can appreciate that other consultants are not in such a lucky position. They do need to actively solicit business. But the thing that I would always encourage anyone who's watching and listening to this is the more you're obvious about it, the less likely you're going to get business. Like if I can stop one person listening to this, stop sending when somebody a LinkedIn invite and then automatically spamming them with their book or their podcast or whatever it might be. Don't do that. People see right through it. So I think the more you said earlier on, like the more you build trust and more you have a natural relationship, as opposed to a transactional relationship, which is only focused on business, I guarantee you a lot of those relationships further down the line are going to result in something that will be good for your consulting business because people want to be around that.
Definitely. I mean, one of the things that we teach our clients in our coaching program is to really focus on the relationships, not on the transactions. And exactly to your point around like LinkedIn, I mean, I think we all get inundated now with people who connect and just start essentially spamming and saying, here's what I have for me. While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. But you would never do that at an event. Like if you met someone at an event, you would never say, hi, my name is Michael. Here's my book. Do you want to buy it? Or my podcast? Do you want to join me in this group? You would never do that, right?
Right.
You would
Exactly.
start to ask some questions and find ways to add some value and make sure that it's relevant, or else it would be over very quickly. Yet just because technology now allows people to automate and to work at volume, it's really causing, I think, a lot of distrust around the different platforms. But ultimately, it causes a lot of frustration for people and confusion because they expect it to work, thinking that it's going to create a lot of business opportunities for them. But really, the most success comes from making sure that your outreach, that your conversations, that what you're doing is tailored, it's customized, it's specific, it adds value and shows that you're not just taking people through a list of others.
I completely agree with you. I mean, to me, authenticity is so critical. I think it's natural for a lot of people. You think, wow, I've got all of these tools at my disposal. I've got Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. I've got my blog. I can use Medium. There's all of this opportunity to sit in my chair and grow a presence. And I think it's really valuable to grow presence, but there is such a thing as too much. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know where the line is either. I have an intuition in myself that you got to be careful. Like a good example is with my new book, People Power, that's coming out in November. I solicited a ton of endorsements from people, right? So I've got like the CEO of GitHub, the CTO of Microsoft, the COO of HelloSign, the CEO of Santander in Spain, all of these people that I'm really proud to have endorsed the book. So I've been putting out these little testimonial images on social media. And when I was originally planning this months ago and I was scheduling all of this in, I was going to post one a day. And I thought, who wants to see that? Nobody. Nobody wants to see this influx of testimonials and endorsements. It's too much. So what I've done is I've said to some of my closest friends, if you ever think that I'm pushing it too far, I trust that you can tell me and I won't be upset with you, but I need you to tell me if I'm edging into the wrong territory, because everybody does at some point. And I'm not claiming that I'm
on social, Jono. Isn't it that even if you post once a day, I mean, the percentage of your network or connections that would actually see it is still quite small. Like I've heard on LinkedIn, or your organic reach might only be 20 or 30% to your network. So I get what you're saying. It's about not really overloading, but at the same time, if you didn't post enough, right, then you might not actually get in front of the people that you want to reach.
Exactly. And I think a lot of it depends on the time zone that you're focusing on. So for example, I post material early morning Pacific time, but I also post it very late at night in the US. So it hits the European and the kind of Eastern markets, I guess you could say. So, I think like anything, it's a balance. But that to me is part of the thrill of consulting, is that everything you do, everything that you're working on is an investment in your own success. And you make mistakes and you push it too far and then you recalibrate and off you go.
So your new book, People Powered, let's just talk about this for a moment here. And the real question I have for you is, in the book, you talk about like Salesforce, Lego, right? Other businesses that have benefited from communities and kind of fostering, cultivating, right? Developing communities, and how it's actually been very beneficial to their business. And the question that I have is, can communities in any way benefit either an independent consultant or a small consulting firm? Or is it really something that's more beneficial to a larger organization?
That's a really fantastic question. So I think communities there can be benefits to communities in a broad number of areas. And I think it could definitely apply to consulting firms. There are kind of two elements to this. There is building a community who gets together based around what you're doing. So for example, if you've got a consulting practice and building a community of your customers, or building a community of, if you're specializing in an area, let's say you're specializing in developers, a community of developers who are doing consulting. I think there's a lot of value in that. But there is also a second area, which is taking a community-centric approach, right? So playing a role in your community. Like a really good friend of mine, for example, here in California, he's very active in his local chamber. He organizes local events as part of this work. And you can walk into any bar in my town and everybody knows him. And he's just very active in his local community. So I think for some consultants who are less on like a global stage, working with larger companies and more working with local firms, there is enormous value around that, about being an active participant as well.
Right. So actually, I really love that point, because Per Marshall talks about the idea of like building the ecosystem, right? And I think that's kind of like what you're getting at is, it's not so much that that a consultant or a small consulting firm should think about or spend time with the idea of, okay, how do I build like my own network community from a technological standpoint, but rather how can I create and kind of foster and cultivate this community like that I play a role in, where I have different partners. So maybe it's different accounting firms or law firms or technology or software providers, where I add value for them, they add value for me. And all together, we've created this community that supports each of our businesses.
Exactly. I mean, the thing as well that underlines everything that you've just said there, Michael, is people powered. When I wrote this book, the core ingredient that entire book is about, it's all about the value of building really meaningful relationships. And where you do build a community is giving people a sense of purpose. That's what it's really about. So I apply a lot of this, for example, to my own clients. When I'm working with clients, it's not just a case of, okay, we agree the work that we're going to do. I put together a statement of work, I send it over, and off we go. I say to my clients, like, I am invested in your success. So if you want me to introduce you to people who I know who might be a good person to have a relationship with, obviously I check with that person first. I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to tell you which events you should be at. I'm happy to provide guidance on you.
Jono, is that at the stage before they hire you? Is it halfway through the project? When do you typically make that part of the conversation?
I make the very first time I speak to them. Because the thing I say to a lot of clients is, and this might offend a reasonable portion of your audience, is At times, I'm embarrassed to say I'm a consultant. And the reason why I say that is because I think there are some consultants out there, and I think it's a minority, who charge a lot of money to give a fairly mediocre level of work. And what they do is they basically stick to the statement of work to a T. And what I say to my clients is what you're paying for is you're paying for undeniable value. Right. And I say this, for example, to clients who say, well, you're a bit expensive. And I'll say, if you think I'm a bit expensive, then don't go with me, because the amount that my fee, I'm going to generate far more value for you beyond the fee. That's the purpose of this. And I say from day one, my role here in a consulting relationship with you is I'm going to be looking for areas of opportunity to add value. I'm not going to stick to the statement of work exclusively. I mean, that's going to be the agreement about what I'm broadly here to do. But if I meet someone at a conference who I think would be a great person for you to have a conversation with, if I hear about a new technology that I think you should be using, if I see an article that I think you should go and read, I'm going to be looking for that. And I don't think all consultants do that. And I would definitely encourage your audience to do this, because people are really receptive to that, because they want that. They want someone who they feel is like, who are the best employees? People you don't just give work to, people who are proactively looking to add value to your organization.
I think that's a great tip for people, right? A great idea that people can use to differentiate themselves and to create more value, right, in the eyes of buyers, and also to justify, to a degree, the idea of premium pricing, right? It's just something different. It's a reason why. So 2 quick questions for you. First, right now, what does your typical engagement in terms of size look like? Like, what's kind of the range of, you don't do anything less than, as an example, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, and it goes to $1 million? Or what does that kind of range look like in terms of work that you take on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I want to get into pricing. In terms of size, I think of size really primarily in terms of how much of my time does it take up. So I don't tend to take up, so I'm actually in a process of transition here, because when I started out, I was taking on lots of clients. I'd have 10, 12 clients at a time. And I found that the context switching was just crushing between these different clients. I'm actively trying to reduce that. I'm actually down to more like 5 or 6 clients, which is where I want to get to. So each of those clients is much larger. So I tend to take on clients that are probably not as big. So there are some consultants, they have, like a friend of mine, for example, he has one very large client and he works with them for an extended period of time, 6-8 months. I tend to work with a collection of clients with a smaller slice, but I tend to work with them for much longer periods of time. So the average amount of time for one of my engagements is 15 months, but the client is much smaller.
On project billing, or is it hourly billing? Are you using value and ROI? What's your kind of structure or framework to pricing?
It's a combination. So at the very beginning if a client's brand new to all of this and they have no idea what they're doing, and they're still evaluating whether they even want a community in the first place, I'll do essentially what I call a trusted assessment, which is a project-based assessment. So they can have a fixed fee that they know is going to get them a really solid assessment of whether they should even go down this area. It's essentially a report. The majority of my active billing it's not hourly like a lawyer where, I'll bill people for 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. I don't believe in that.
You don't charge for staples or photocopies?
Right, exactly. What I do is I will be available to clients for a certain number of hours a month, typically.
So it's more like a retainer type of structure.
More of a retainer structure. But what I do is I say to clients, look, I call it fair use, where I say to clients, look, there's going to be some months when you don't need me for as many hours, and there's going to be some months when you need me for more. Again, my goal here is that we're not nickel and diming the number of hours or whether you're getting the value for the dollars that you're putting in there. It should be undeniable that you're getting the value. The overall engagement should be an equitable arrangement for everybody. So,
got it. Second question is, you do a great job on your website of displaying testimonials, right? Feedback from clients about you and your work and so forth. A lot of consultants, I think, recognize the value of testimonials, but they hesitate to get them, or they don't do it. What advice would you have on getting testimonials?
If you don't ask, you don't get. it's my advice.
So when do you ask? When have you found is the best time to ask for a testimonial?
So what I'll usually do is when I've worked with someone for at least 6 or 8 months. I mean, I mentioned earlier on with some clients, I have this this initial project. First of all, one of the reasons why I do that, and I say this to clients, is it's not just to give you a sense of whether you should build a community, but it gives me an opportunity to prove myself and to see whether this is a worthwhile engagement for us both. So I take the same approach with testimonials, that if we've been working together for a while, then I'll ask for I'll say to someone, I'd love if you'd write a testimonial. I completely understand. And I'll go overboard saying, I completely understand if you don't want to do it. Because I appreciate that if I ask you, other people may ask you, you don't want to start that trend. And no one's ever said no. Sometimes it's taken a while to get it approved by their legal teams for bigger companies.
And do you suggest or offer them some rough kind of draft as to maybe what the testimonial could include or cover, or do they just write it themselves?
It's happened a few times like that, but usually, there's been a few times where people have said, would you mind writing something up for me to review? Because I don't know where to begin. And what I'll usually do is write a couple of options for them, and I'll say, like, please go and edit it as much as you want. I don't want to put words in your mouth. But, I would very strongly encourage people to put testimonials on your website. It really does help a lot. And you've got to constantly ask for them as well. Like, I actually haven't updated mine for a while, but I just got a raft of new endorsements for People Powered. So I've just put that on my website as well. And 9 times out of 10, people are happy to provide something for you. If they think that you did a bad job, then you probably don't want to ask them. But so far, I haven't had that, which I'm lucky with. So
we tend to do the same thing. If you go to consultingsuccess.com and check out, for example, the coaching page or other pages, we're always asking for case studies or results or how clients are doing. One, because that helps us to gauge how things are working for them and how we can better support them. But also, we want to share that success and help others to see what's possible, because oftentimes what's holding people back from taking action or making a decision is not, the understanding of whether or not they can do it. It's just, there's some hesitation. And so for them to see that others have achieved it gives them the feeling, okay, maybe I can do this too. And that's now the start of what they need to actually begin the process, which will get them closer to the result.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. I think it's absolutely that is the case. Because often people are like, okay, I'm sold on your product, I'm sold on your service, but the the endorsements are often they just get you over the finish line. So
definitely. Well, listen, I really enjoyed the conversation today. I want to thank you so much for coming on. Where's the best place for people to go to learn more about you, to get the book, or to find out more information about the book?
Yep. So my website has everything on it. You can go to jonobacon.com. That's Jono, like Bono, but without the money or the talent. Jono Bacon, like the meat.com. And the book is at jonobacon.com/peoplepowered. And there's a pre-order package available for the book right now before it comes out on the 12th of November with a whole raft of perks. And it's available on all good bookshops. So.
Good stuff. Jono, thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully I haven't butchered your name too much in the early stages of the conversation.
It's perfect.
But I'm glad that we've got it straightened out. And we'll definitely link to all this in the show notes. So you can check that out at consultingsuccess.com and type in Jono and you'll find it very quickly. But thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.